G'day everyone, Josh Ruddy from Australian Catholic University. Firstly, a big thank you to Rob from Strength of Science for inviting me to briefly chat about some of the key findings from our recent paper published in MSSE. So a lot of researchers attempted to identify factors that increase or decrease the risk of hamstring injury. And some of the more commonly and consistently identified risk factors include increasing age, a history of hamstring injury, low levels of eccentric hamstring strength. Now, despite all these factors being highly associated with the risk of injury at a group level, no research has actually investigated the ability of these risk factors to predict injury at the individual level, and accordingly this was the purpose of the current study. So we actually had some data that was collected during the 2013 AFL season, and this has been previously published by Opar et al. But we actually decided to replicate these data collection methods during the 2015 AFL season. So we collected demographic and lower limb injury history data for each athlete, as well as eccentric hamstring strength using the Nord board at the start of pre-season, and any prospectively occurring hamstring injuries were reported to us. Now, in terms of the statistical analysis, we took a machine learning approach, and if you're unfamiliar with machine learning, I encourage you to check out Sam Robertson's podcast for Pacey Performance. He discusses machine learning in a little bit more depth, but Figure 1 basically outlines the modeling approach that we took. So we did some individual within-year analysis where we took the 2013 data and randomly sampled it 10,000 times, and each time we used 70% of it as training data to predict the remaining 30% as testing data. We did this with the 2015 data as well. We also did some between-year prediction where we took the 2013 data and used it to predict the 2015 data. So I encourage you to check out the paper and all of our findings, but if we take a look at some of the key findings, interestingly, in 2013, the injured athletes were a lot weaker than the uninjured athletes in terms of their eccentric hamstring strength. However, in 2015, the overall cohort was a lot stronger, and there was no difference between the injured and uninjured athletes. Despite this, the injury rate was 15% in both 2013 and 2015. If we take a look at Figure 2, Figure 2 illustrates the predicted performance of our within-year models. So on the y-axis, we have area under the curve, which was our performance metric. Think of 1 as getting it right every single time, and think of 0.5 as flipping a coin. First, and perhaps the most important thing to note, is the wide range in area under the curve that we can see here. So some iterations of the model performed quite well and predicted injury at the individual level quite well. Others performed quite poorly. And this really indicates the fragility of this data set. So small changes to that randomly sampled training and testing data vastly influence the results. But overall, if we look at the average predicted performance of our models indicated by the dotted line, we can see that they predicted injury better than the flip of a coin, which is a start, but we still have a long way to go in terms of being confident in our ability to identify athletes at risk of injury at the individual level. So I suppose the biggest practical implication of this study is for practitioners using this data to look at athletes on an individual level and gauge their level of risk. We really need to be cognizant of the fact that these variables don't explain enough of the risk associated with injury. We currently only have a very small slice of the pie, and there's still a number of unanswered questions. So these measures are still likely important to monitor, but we really need to be wary when using these data to make inferences and make decisions. But ultimately, in conclusion, eccentric hamstring strength, age, and previous hamstring injury data cannot be used to identify athletes at an increased risk of hamstring injury with any consistency. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to all my co-authors for making this publication possible. Feel free to search me up on Twitter if you have any questions.